Okay, I'm moving on now. We've had a look at how the wheel is constructed. Next step is to block in various panels and sections of the vehicle and to try and work out in the mind's eye what sections will be on top of other sections. So if I show you what I've got, you get a bit of an idea how far I've got with this. So it's basically blocking in certain sections. And what I will do is jump between outline and artwork mode quite frequently so you can see how things are shaping up and you can see the lines I've used through here. I'll turn the wheel layer off, simplify things. I've got to start on the grille. I've got to start on the lights. I haven't done any detail on those yet, and most of this I tried to do fairly rapidly, so I wouldn't say that I'm expecting these lines to be really dead accurate or anything, but essentially keep these efficient as possible. If you can see how these handles, when they're about roughly a third of the distance, you get a smooth line. See that? If that's a really short handle and that's a really long one, hard to manipulate something nice and smooth. Vice versa if that was really long and short or whatever. So both being nice and easy and like handlebars and you can just move them around. When you get to a corner point, it's a different matter because that obviously is just manipulating one half of the curve. This, anyway, this is the way it is, and I've basically tried, as you can see, I've tried to just do minimal amount of control points. This isn't as nice as I would probably like because I was trying to get it moving along as quick as possible. So let's go backwards and zoom out here and let's see what we've got. First up, what I want to do is explain my thinking process behind why I've drawn what I've drawn. Things like the windscreen, these windows, they're going to be sitting on top of everything else. So they're up high on the, they're above the body and all the other things. Further up on further forward, which is up on the layers palette, I've got things like the lights, because they'll be on top of everything else. And on top of everything else, again, will be things like highlights. But I've also put some other layers, like I've got a spare lines, which I might use to, if I copy, if I make an adjustment on a line, I think, well, if I do a pathfinder and it's going to cut and I'm going to lose it, which what happens when you intersect things, I want the original, and I always keep spares of lines that I've done because you never know when you cut something and you think, oh, I shouldn't have done that. It was like 5 processes before, and you find out you've got to redraw something. So I tend to make duplicates of layers just in case I need to come back to it. Back to where I was talking about now. My line of thinking in here is I was going to make windows separate, and then I looked around here and I thought, well, there's a natural difference between this section and this section. That line obviously is something, a different panel I can use, and I decided to just do this top bit around there as a separate piece I can put on top. I'm looking further ahead when I do colouring. I'll match up certain things the same tone from top to bottom, so that's okay. This section will be something like a highlight. I'd call that a highlight. So it'll be lighter than, say, this mid-tone. And that's kind of what I'm doing, looking at mid-tones, highlights, and shadows. Shadow, highlight, mid-tone. And that's what I'm essentially doing at the beginning. I don't want to do anything more. And things like this thing, or what is that, a chrome strip, that goes on later. That's a separate layer that will sit on top. That'll include a thing like that. Little mirror thing, that'll go on top later. These hinges go on top later. Lines like this through there, they all go on top later. So I ignore those. And that's something you've got to kind of learn how to do, is ignore some of the things. Here's another part I decided I would take this fender part as one separate piece, different to the background or the body. Mainly because when you do have separate pieces, like you can see how there's separate pieces there, what it does, it allows me to work on pieces individually, and when you do that, it becomes more manageable. And there's a tricky thing about how big is the piece is meant to be, or small. But a natural place like that front fender part would probably a natural thing. That back part would probably a natural separate piece. You could do the doors separate. I think I've chosen just to do the whole body, which is like the body, the roof, and the bonnet as one piece. To me, that looked like could be one piece, and on top of that I would put highlights and strips of extra bits and little badges and whatever on top. Another piece looked to be this separate section here. Another piece would be the grille and obviously these lights, the bumper, another section, and you stack them up with your layers. And that's what I've done. All of this is just exactly what I've mentioned, and that should be on top of something else, and that should be on top again, pretty high up in the list as well. So starting off, just get that amount done. Just line work. Don't worry too much about the tone, the gradation, the soft shading, because it becomes too much to with your brain trying to understand everything. So have sections that you can work with, and that'll be enough to start with at this point. And things like this go on top of the underlying component. One other thing, you could do something called a compound path, which I have discussed in the past, where literally you're cutting out a hole in this. So whether I can achieve that on one layer or not, I don't know. Let's have a go at it. Object, compound path. Because they were on two different layers, it's done it, and it's just brought it together on one layer. If I move that, you might see the hole it's created. That's a compound path. You could do that as well. That's another method. You don't need to obviously start making a component like this that sits on top like that as an opaque piece. You could make a hole like that. So either one works, but you still need to show what's inside. But that's another story altogether, which I won't go into at the moment. Just get the line work for the main pieces is together as much as possible. Obviously, what I've got here, I've taken sections and used Pathfinder to intersect. So I've got a very, very neat, what's the word, butting up of these two, this object and this object together are using what looks like one line, but there's actually two lines. Each have their own component of that line. And that makes it simple. If you can use Pathfinder, I've shown that in previous examples. And there we go. That's all we've got for the moment. I won't get any further with that, but more to come, I guess. There's more detail. One other thing, this is something I used. If I bring this up, sorry, there we go. I just used for the grill something. I'll go and I'll do it on a spare layer so you can see it here. So there we go. Those things are simply a rounded rectangle like that, and I rotate it. I press R for rotate, click for the axis there, and just made the angle that I wanted. And I might have even scaled it, same axis, and I dragged this thing out like so. So you can see I'm not going very hard at the work of trying to make these. Tools are already there for us. So don't draw those with a pen ever. No need to. All right, so I'll stop it at that, and to be continued.